I'm Alma, 54 years old, and I've been a single mother since my son Ethan was just 2. After my divorce from Richard Henderson, I waited tables at 3 different restaurants to keep a roof over our heads. His family never thought I was good enough, especially his mother Eleanor, but nothing prepared me for that moment at Victoria's wedding when I found my place card labeled Single Mother Waitress instead of my name. The laughter still echoes in my memory. What happened next changed everything, thanks to my 8-year-old son. Before I tell you how my 8-year-old son stood up for me that night, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit the like button if you believe a mother's worth isn't defined by her paycheck or marital status. I grew up in Millfield, a small town in Ohio, where most families worked at the local factory or in service jobs. My father repaired appliances, while my mother cleaned houses for the wealthier families across town. We weren't poor by local standards, but we watched every penny. College was my dream, from the time I understood what it was imagining myself as a teacher, with my own classroom decorated with colorful posters and children's artwork. Reality had different plans. My senior year of high school, Dad's back injury put him out of work for 6 months. My college fund, carefully built from birthday money and summer jobs, went to keeping our electricity on and food on the table. Instead of heading to State University that fall, I found myself applying for jobs. The Silver Spoon restaurant was the fanciest place in Millfield, catering to business people and the upper middle class. I started as a hostess, but quickly moved to waitressing when they saw how efficiently I worked. The tips were decent, and I told myself it was temporary just until I saved enough for community college. 3 years into this temporary job, Richard Henderson walked in. He wasn't like our usual customers wearing a suit that even I could tell cost more than my monthly rent. He sat alone at table 7, ordered the most expensive steak, and left a $100 tip on a $70 bill. When I thanked him, stammering in surprise, he simply smiled and said, "I appreciate good service." He returned the next night and asked for my section. And the night after that. By his 4th visit, he asked me to join him for coffee after my shift. I said yes, curious about this handsome stranger who seemed genuinely interested in my small-town life. Richard was from money, old money. The Hendersons owned a manufacturing empire headquartered in Chicago, but with facilities across the Midwest, including one just outside Millfield. He was in town temporarily, overseeing some operational changes at the plant. Everything about him fascinated me. His confidence, his worldliness, the way he could make decisions without consulting price tags. Our whirlwind romance progressed faster than seasons changing. Within 3 months, he proposed with a diamond that made my co-workers gasp. I said yes, dazzled by not just the ring, but the promise of a different life, one where financial anxiety wouldn't be my constant companion. Meeting his family sobered my fairy tale expectations. Eleanor Henderson, Richard's mother, hosted our first meeting at their Chicago mansion. I still remember her eyes scanning me from head to toe, lingering on my department store dress and practical shoes. "So, you're the waitress," she said, not quite a question, not quite a greeting. "Alma," Richard corrected. "Her name is Alma Wilson." "Of course." Eleanor smiled thinly. "Will you be continuing your career after the wedding?" The way she said career made it clear what she thought of my job. Despite Eleanor's thinly veiled disapproval, we proceeded with wedding plans. Or rather, Eleanor proceeded with them, overruling my simple ideas with extravagant alternatives. What I envisioned as a small garden ceremony became a 300-guest affair at Chicago's most exclusive venue. My modest dress budget multiplied tenfold when Eleanor insisted we shop at designers I'd only seen in magazines. "We have a position to maintain," she explained when I expressed concern about the cost. A Henderson wedding is a social statement. The wedding day itself passed in a blur of unfamiliar traditions and faces I didn't recognize. I felt like an actress, playing a part rather than a bride. Richard's business associates outnumbered my family and friends 10 to 1, and I overheard more than one guest wondering aloud how Richard had met me. The early months of marriage seemed to validate my decision despite these warning signs. Richard was attentive and generous. We settled into a beautiful apartment in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood, and he encouraged me to take time before deciding about work or school. I enjoyed setting up our home and adapting to city life, though Eleanor's weekly visits often left me feeling scrutinized and found wanting. "The silver isn't properly arranged," she would note, rearranging the settings I'd carefully placed. Or, "That painting is rather common, isn't it? We must introduce you to proper art." Richard would squeeze my hand reassuringly after these visits. "Mother means well. She just has high standards." When I became pregnant 6 months after the wedding, Richard was ecstatic. Eleanor was not. "So soon," she remarked, eyebrows raised. "Most Henderson women establish themselves socially before starting a family. There's a proper order to these things." Throughout my pregnancy, Eleanor's suggestions intensified. She had opinions on everything from my prenatal vitamins to the color scheme for the nursery. Most disturbing were her comments about my education. "The Henderson heir deserves a mother who can guide his intellectual development," she would say. "Perhaps you should consider some courses at the Cultural Center. Your background is rather limited." Richard's demeanor began shifting during this time too. As his father delegated more responsibility at the company, Richard worked later hours and traveled frequently. When home, he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly and having hushed conversations in his office. After Ethan's birth, Richard's emotional distance widened. He adored our son, but seemed increasingly critical of me. My postpartum body drew subtle frowns. My conversation topics were met with impatience. Increasingly, he echoed his mother's sentiments about my educational and cultural deficiencies. "The other executives' wives all have degrees," he noted after a company dinner. "It was obvious you couldn't keep up with the conversation about fiscal policy." The final blow came when Ethan was 18 months old. Richard's assistant called me by mistake, assuming she'd reached his voicemail. Her message referenced dinner reservations with someone named Catherine and mentioned the usual hotel arrangements. When confronted, Richard didn't deny the affair. Catherine Porter came from a banking family that moved in the same social circles as the Hendersons. They had met at a charity gala I'd missed because Ethan had an ear infection. "It just happened," Richard explained lamely. "Catherine understands the pressures I'm under. She's from my world." The divorce was quick but painful. Richard's attorneys offered a settlement that seemed generous until I realized it barely covered basic living expenses for Ethan and me. The family's influence ensured Richard received primary custody on paper, though we all knew his 70-hour work weeks meant Ethan would primarily live with me. "The Henderson name carries certain advantages," his attorney explained clinically. "The judge recognizes that." 2 months after signing the papers, I moved out of our luxury apartment and into a small 2-bedroom unit in a modest neighborhood. At 29, I was a single mother with an incomplete education, limited work experience, and a toddler depending entirely on me. The real journey was just beginning. The first year after the divorce nearly broke me. The settlement money covered our small apartment and basic necessities, but little else. Richard's child support payments came irregularly, always with some excuse about business expenses or accounting delays. I suspected Eleanor's influence in this financial uncertainty, keeping me dependent on their goodwill. I returned to waitressing, the one marketable skill I had. La Piazza, an Italian restaurant, hired me for dinner shifts, but the tips weren't enough. I added morning shifts at a breakfast diner and weekend work catering private events. Working 3 jobs meant piecing together a patchwork of childcare, a neighbor watching Ethan mornings, a discounted spot at a daycare during afternoons, and weekend babysitting trades with other single mothers in our building. Sleep became a luxury I rarely enjoyed. Most nights I collapsed into bed after midnight, having finished a dinner shift, prepped Ethan's clothes and lunch for the next day, and completed whatever household tasks couldn't wait. The alarm would ring at 5, starting the cycle again. Christmas that first year brought a painful reality check. The Hendersons sent a car to collect Ethan for their annual holiday gathering, but the invitation pointedly excluded me. When Ethan returned, he babbled excitedly about the enormous tree mountains of presents and fancy food on tiny plates. That night, I cried silently in the bathroom, comparing his excitement there with our tiny artificial tree and the 3 modest gifts I'd managed to purchase. Next year will be better, I promised myself, wiping away tears. Somehow. My neighbor Denise became my first real ally in this new life. Also a single mother, she had been navigating these waters for years and recognized the overwhelmed look in my eyes. You need a long-term plan, she advised over coffee one rare quiet morning. Waitressing is honest work, but the body gives out eventually. What did you want to be before life happened? A teacher, I admitted. Elementary school. But college seems impossible now. Denise slid a community college brochure across the table. 2 classes per semester, that's all. It'll take longer, but you'll get there. And teaching jobs have health benefits, and summers with your kid. With Denise's encouragement, I enrolled in night classes, adding yet another commitment to my impossible schedule. Tuesdays and Thursdays became marathon days, breakfast shift, quick shower afternoon with Ethan handoff, to Denise night class, late dinner shift, homework after midnight. On those nights, I averaged 3 hours of sleep. What kept me going was Ethan, my bright, curious boy who deserved every opportunity I could provide. By age 4, he was reading simple books, asking endless questions about how things worked, and showing remarkable empathy for others. While the Hendersons measured success in financial terms, I emphasized different values with Ethan. We may not have fancy things, I told him, but we can be kind, work hard, and help others. That makes us rich in the ways that really matter. These weren't empty platitudes. Even with our limited resources, we found ways to contribute. We baked cookies for elderly neighbors, volunteered at church events, and always saved a few coins for any donation jar we encountered. Ethan absorbed these lessons, often surprising me with his generosity toward others. Richard's presence in Ethan's life was sporadic at best. The custody agreement granted him alternate weekends, but business trips frequently interfered. He would compensate by sending expensive toys or arranging special outings when he was available, creating a Disneyland dad dynamic that confused Ethan. "Why doesn't Daddy live with us?" he asked after one of Richard's cancellations. I was careful never to speak negatively about his father. Sometimes adults work better living separately, but we both love you very much. Eleanor Henderson maintained her influence through quarterly assessment visits to our apartment. She would arrive unannounced, inspecting everything from Ethan's wardrobe to the contents of our refrigerator. "Store-brand cereal," she once remarked, holding the box with 2 fingers, as if it might contaminate her. "The Henderson heir deserves proper nutrition." I bit my tongue, not mentioning that her son's irregular support payments meant store brands were often our only option. Eleanor would leave these visits with a list of concerns she'd share with Richard, usually resulting in a condescending phone call about my parenting. Despite these challenges, we developed resilience. The network of single mothers in our building became an unofficial support system, trading childcare sharing job leads and providing emotional support during crises. When Denise's car broke down, we organized a transportation schedule so she wouldn't miss work. When my final exam conflicted with Ethan's preschool graduation, 3 different neighbors offered to record the ceremony. By Ethan's 6th birthday, I had completed my associate degree and transferred to a state university to finish my teaching credentials. The scholarship I'd secured covered most tuition costs, though I still worked weekends and summers to make ends meet. Ethan had grown into a thoughtful, articulate child who thrived at school and made friends easily, showing none of the behavioral issues common among children of divorce. The spring before Ethan turned 8 brought my greatest professional triumph, completing my bachelor's degree in elementary education. With my teaching certificate in hand, I secured a position at Ethan's school teaching 3rd grade. The salary was modest by Henderson standards, but represented financial stability we hadn't known since the divorce. More importantly, my work schedule finally aligned with Ethan's, eliminating our childcare patchwork. That autumn, my principal nominated me for New Educator of the Year, an honor bestowed by our district on first-year teachers showing exceptional promise. To my astonishment, I won. The local newspaper ran a small feature about my journey from single motherhood through education to teaching, focusing on perseverance and community support. I was building a life on my terms, defined by values rather than wealth. What I didn't realize was how dramatically this foundation would be tested at Victoria Henderson's wedding. The ivory envelope arrived on a Tuesday, its heavy cardstock and embossed lettering immediately identifying it as coming from the Henderson world. Inside was an invitation to Victoria Henderson's wedding to Marcus Chamberlain's scion of another wealthy Chicago family. Victoria was Richard's younger sister, a woman I'd met perhaps a dozen times during my marriage and rarely since. Why would she invite us? I wondered aloud, showing the invitation to Ethan. "Can we go? I want to see Aunt Victoria and Dad," Ethan asked eagerly. My first instinct was to decline. Henderson family gatherings had always left me feeling inadequate, and 6 years of independence hadn't fully healed those wounds. But before I could decide, Richard called. "Mother specifically asked that you and Ethan attend," he said without preamble. "It's important to Victoria to have family present, and Ethan should participate in significant family events." Something in his tone made me suspicious. Eleanor had spent years minimizing my connection to the family, and now she wanted me present at this high-profile event. "I'll need to check my schedule." I stalled. "The school year will be finished by then," Richard countered. "I know your calendar is clear." After considerable thought, I accepted primarily for Ethan's sake. He deserved to know his father's family, regardless of how they treated me. Plus, I was no longer the insecure young woman they had once intimidated. I had built a career and raised an exceptional child without their help. Perhaps it was time to engage with them on more equal footing. The practical concerns came next. The wedding would be held at the exclusive Lakeshore Country Club, requiring appropriate attire. My teacher's salary covered our necessities with a small margin for savings, but formal wear for a society wedding wasn't in the budget. "We'll find something perfect," I assured Ethan, who was already excited about wearing a fancy suit like Dad. Our shopping expedition took us to 3 discount stores before finding an acceptable option, a navy blue suit for Ethan that needed minimal alterations, and a simple burgundy dress for me that looked more expensive than its price tag. The total cost consumed most of my discretionary budget for the month, requiring careful planning for other expenses. Ethan noticed me calculating costs on my phone as we checked out. That evening, he approached me with his dinosaur-shaped piggy bank. "Mom, you can use my money too," he said earnestly. "I have $37.22 from Grandma's birthday card and helping Mrs. Finch with her recycling." My heart swelled at his generosity. "That's very kind, buddy, but I want you to save your money. We're doing just fine." His awareness of our financial situation sometimes worried me. No 8-year-old should understand budget constraints or feel responsible for family finances. Yet his offer also reflected the values I'd tried to instill: generosity, awareness of others' needs, and shared responsibility. As the wedding date approached, I prepared Ethan for potential uncomfortable interactions. Without disparaging the Hendersons, I explained that different families have different priorities and ways of showing respect. Some people think having expensive things or important jobs makes someone better than others, I explained carefully. "But what do you think makes a person valuable?" "Being kind," Ethan replied promptly, "and helping people when they need it." "Exactly. So if anyone at the wedding says something that doesn't seem kind, remember that's about them, not about us." We also needed a wedding gift. The registry listed items starting at $300, well beyond my budget. Instead, I suggested we create something meaningful. Victoria had once mentioned admiring a memory quilt her college roommate received, displaying photo transfers of significant moments. "What if we make Aunt Victoria a special picture book?" I suggested, with photos and stories of her growing up and spaces for wedding photos and her new adventures with Marcus. Ethan loved this idea, particularly when I suggested we interview family members for stories and memories. Over the next several weeks, he called Richard elderly relatives, and even Victoria herself, collecting anecdotes and requesting photo contributions. I taught him how to lay out the pages, combining photographs with decorative elements, and leaving space for Victoria's future additions. The night before the wedding, Ethan carefully wrapped our homemade gift while I ironed our outfits. My stomach knotted with anxiety, old insecurities surfacing despite my best efforts. "Mom," Ethan asked, noticing my expression, "are you worried about tomorrow?" I considered deflecting, but opted for honesty. "A little. Sometimes being around Dad's family makes me nervous." Ethan set down the ribbon he was curling and hugged me fiercely. "You're the best mum ever, and anyone who doesn't see that is just silly." His unconditional support steadied me. Whatever happened tomorrow, I had succeeded in raising a child with a strong moral compass and genuine compassion. No society wedding could diminish that achievement. The Lakeshore Country Club sprawled across prime Chicago lakefront property, its manicured grounds and colonial architecture screaming old money and exclusivity. Valets in crisp uniforms whisked away luxury vehicles, while guests in designer attire air-kissed and exchanged practiced compliments. Ethan and I arrived in my practical sedan, immediately conspicuous among the Mercedes and Bentleys. Inside, the decoration theme was understated opulence, if such a contradiction could exist. White orchids and roses adorned every surface, crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, and champagne flowed freely from fountains flanking the entrance. I estimated the flower budget alone exceeded my annual salary. "Wow," Ethan whispered, eyes wide. "It looks like a movie in here." We navigated toward the ceremony space, passing clusters of guests who eyed us with thinly veiled curiosity. I recognized a few faces from my married days, mostly business associates of Richard's father, who offered polite but distant nods of acknowledgement. Richard appeared looking essentially unchanged from our marriage, except for a few silver strands at his temples. His bespoke tuxedo probably cost more than my monthly rent. Beside him stood a willowy blonde woman I didn't recognize, wearing a gown that screamed designer exclusivity. "Daddy!" Ethan broke away, rushing toward his father with the gift box clutched carefully in his hands. Richard's face softened as he hugged Ethan. "Looking sharp, buddy. Is that a new suit?" "Mom took me shopping special for Aunt Victoria's wedding," Ethan explained proudly. Richard glanced my way, offering a stiff nod. "Alma, you look well." "Thank you." The invitation was unexpected but appreciated. The blonde woman extended a manicured hand. "I'm Camille Winters. You must be Ethan's mother. Richard has told me so much about his son." Her phrasing was deliberate, excluding me from whatever much Richard had shared. I shook her hand briefly, noting the substantial diamond on her left hand. Not yet a wife, but clearly positioned to be. Our awkward exchange was interrupted by Eleanor's arrival, resplendent in pale blue silk and family heirloom pearls. She bypassed me entirely, bending to embrace Ethan with theatrical enthusiasm. "My handsome grandson, how wonderful you could come. You look more like a Henderson every day." Ethan, ever polite, returned her hug, but quickly stepped back to my side. "Grandma, did you see the present we made for Aunt Victoria? Mom taught me how to make a memory book with special photos and stories." Eleanor's smile tightened. "How creative. I'm sure Victoria will appreciate the sentiment." Her tone suggested homemade gifts were quaint novelties rather than valuable presents. The ceremony itself was mercifully brief by society standards, though still laden with traditions I suspected were more about display than meaning. Victoria looked genuinely happy, her smile radiant as she exchanged vows with Marcus. Despite our limited relationship, I felt genuine gladness for her finding someone who clearly adored her. As guests moved toward the reception ballroom, staff directed everyone to check the seating chart display, an elaborate arrangement of calligraphed cards on a mirrored backdrop decorated with more orchids. Ethan spotted our names before I did. "Mom, we're at table 12 with Dad and Grandma." Indeed, Ethan Henderson was listed at the family table, as was Richard's name. But when I located my card, cold shock washed over me. Rather than Alma Wilson, my card read Single Mother Waitress, in the same elegant calligraphy as all the others. For a moment I thought I'd misread or found someone else's card. But there it was, positioned exactly where mine should be, an unmistakable insult disguised as a seating assignment. "Mom, why does your card say that?" Ethan asked, confusion in his voice. Before I could formulate a response, Eleanor appeared beside us, a champagne flute in hand, and several friends in tow. "Oh dear," she said with exaggerated concern, voice loud enough to attract attention from nearby guests. "There seems to be a mistake with the seating arrangements." She plucked the offensive card from the display, holding it up for her companions to see. "Though it is accurate, isn't it? Tonight's waitress, just a used product." Laughter rippled through the surrounding guests, some genuine, others uncomfortable but unwilling to contradict Eleanor's social power. My face burned with humiliation, especially seeing Ethan's confusion transforming into understanding. I looked for Richard, finding him several feet away, witnessing everything but remaining silent, studying his polished shoes rather than meeting my eyes. Victoria and Marcus were across the room greeting other guests, unaware of the scene unfolding. Years of carefully constructed confidence threatened to crumble under this public humiliation. I had anticipated subtle digs, perhaps some condescending comments about my teaching career. But this deliberate public attempt to reduce me to a stereotype in front of my son was beyond what I'd prepared for. Taking a deep breath, I placed my hand on Ethan's shoulder, intending to guide us away from Eleanor's cruel spotlight, perhaps even to leave the event entirely. But Ethan had other ideas. With a determined expression I recognized from his most challenging homework sessions, he took my hand and led me not toward the exit, but toward the center of the ballroom, where a microphone stood on a small platform, apparently for upcoming toasts. "Ethan, what are you doing?" I whispered, alarmed. "It's okay, Mom," he said with a confidence beyond his years. "I know what to say." Ethan marched toward the microphone platform with purpose, his small stature making the journey seem longer. At 8 years old, he barely reached the microphone even on the raised platform. A few guests noticed his movement, nudging others and pointing with amused expressions, expecting some cute childish moment. With surprising poise, Ethan adjusted the microphone and tapped it gently to ensure it was working. The soft thud echoed through the ballroom speakers, gradually silencing conversations as attention turned toward this unexpected interruption. From across the room, I saw Victoria's questioning look and Richard's alarmed expression as he realized what was happening. "Hello?" Ethan's clear voice carried through the sound system. "My name is Ethan, and I'm 8 years old. My mom is Alma." A ripple of indulgent smiles spread through the crowd, guests charmed by what they assumed would be a child's impulsive speech. Eleanor remained near the seating display, her expression a mixture of annoyance and patronizing amusement. "I have a gift for the bride, my Aunt Victoria," Ethan continued confidently. "But first I want to tell you something important." The room quieted further curiosity, replacing amusement, as this small boy commanded attention with unexpected eloquence. "My mom works really hard," he said, his voice strong and clear. "When I was little, she worked at 3 restaurants so I could have food and clothes and books. Sometimes she would come home with feet so tired she could barely walk, but she always read me a bedtime story." My heart pounded as Ethan continued his words, unrehearsed yet powerful. "She would help me with homework after working all day, even when she was super tired. She taught me that it doesn't matter what job you have, what matters is doing your best and being kind to people." Guests shifted uncomfortably, the cute child moment transforming into something more confrontational. I saw Victoria and Marcus exchanging concerned glances, clearly sensing something was amiss, though they'd missed the initial incident. "My grandma calls my mom a waitress like it's a bad thing." Ethan continued his innocent observation, landing like a grenade among the gathered elite. "But my mom says serving others is always honorable work." Eleanor's face flushed crimson. She made a move toward the platform, but was blocked by several guests, now fully engaged in Ethan's unexpected speech. "Actually, my mom isn't just a waitress anymore. She finished college while taking care of me, and now she's a teacher at my school." This revelation caused several heads to turn toward me, reassessing with new information. I stood frozen torn between maternal pride and social mortification. She won New Educator of the Year for our whole district, Ethan announced proudly. There was an article in the newspaper about her. All the kids want to be in Ms. Wilson's class because she makes learning fun and never gives up on anybody who's trying their best. Whispers circulated through the room as this information registered. Eleanor made another attempt to intervene, gesturing for someone to cut the microphone. But Victoria's new husband, Marcus, subtly shook his head at the sound technician. Mom organizes the school food drive every year, and she started a program where kids read to senior citizens who don't have families nearby. The mayor came to our school to thank her for it. Each accomplishment Ethan listed seemed to stand in direct contrast to the dismissive, single Mother Waitress label on my seating card, transforming the intended humiliation into something else entirely. I don't understand why anyone would think my mom should be ashamed, Ethan continued, his genuine confusion evident. She's the hardest working person I know. She taught me that how we treat people shows who we really are, not who they are. The room had fallen completely silent, now the weight of an 8-year-old's moral clarity hanging in the air. I hope everyone remembers that tonight, he concluded. Congratulations, Aunt Victoria. I hope you like our present. With that, Ethan carefully returned the microphone to its stand and walked back toward me, seemingly unaware of the profound impact of his words. Uncertain applause followed him, guests unsure how to respond to being righteously schooled by a child. I wrapped my arm around his shoulders as he reached me, fighting back tears of pride and emotion. "Did I say the right things, Mom?" he whispered suddenly, less confident now that his mission was accomplished. "You said perfect things," I assured him. "I'm so proud of you." Eleanor attempted to recover the moment by loudly announcing dinner service, directing guests toward their tables with forced cheerfulness. The crowd moved somewhat reluctantly, many glancing back at Ethan and me, with expressions ranging from embarrassment to newfound respect. As we stood uncertain about how to proceed without a proper seating card, Victoria approached us, her white gown rustling softly. "Alma, Ethan," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "I am so sorry about what happened. I had no idea about the seating card. That was absolutely inexcusable." Her genuine distress suggested she truly had been unaware of Eleanor's cruel prank. Victoria had always been the least problematic Henderson, though our interactions had been limited. "It's not your fault," I replied, not wanting to taint her wedding day with family drama. "We can slip out quietly if that would be easier." "Absolutely not," Victoria insisted, taking my hand. "Marcus and I want you both here, your family." Marcus joined us, tall and distinguished in his tuxedo, but with kind eyes that reminded me of my father. "I've already had a proper card made," he said, handing me an elegant placement card with Alma Wilson written in the same calligraphy as the others. "And I'd be honored if Ethan would sit beside me. I hear he's quite the baseball fan." Ethan's face lit up at this unexpected validation. "You like baseball too? Cubs season ticket holder since I was your age." Marcus grinned. "Victoria tells me you're a pitching ace." As Victoria and Marcus guided us toward the family table, I noticed Richard finally approaching, his expression unreadable. Camille was noticeably absent from his side. "Mother gets carried away sometimes," he said by way of greeting, voice low. Ethan shouldn't have made a scene. The familiar pattern of excusing Eleanor's behavior while criticizing anyone who challenged it sparked a calm clarity within me. "Our son showed more character than anyone in this room tonight," I replied quietly but firmly. "I've never been prouder." Richard's face registered surprise at my directness. Before he could respond, several guests approached us, introducing themselves with newfound interest. "I'm Diane Levinson," said a distinguished older woman. "I serve on the school board in Northbrook District." "That was quite a testimonial your son gave. We're always looking for innovative educators in our district." "Alma Wilson," I replied, shaking her hand. "I've heard wonderful things about Northbrook's commitment to educational excellence." As we were seated for dinner, I noticed a distinct shift in how guests interacted with us. Victoria made a point of displaying our homemade memory book, prominently among the wedding gifts, genuinely touched by the personal stories Ethan had collected. Several of her college friends sought me out to chat about educational approaches, treating me as a professional colleague rather than a charity case. Eleanor maintained a frigid distance throughout the evening, her social triumph undermined by an 8-year-old's honesty. When she did speak to me, it was with tight formality, her usual condescending advice conspicuously absent. Richard's new girlfriend, Camille, seemed increasingly uncomfortable as the evening progressed, observing the family dynamics with growing concern. I caught her watching Richard's interactions with Ethan, noting the emotional distance even I recognized from my marriage days. Most surprising were the family members who approached me with stories of their own experiences with Eleanor's behavior over the years. She did something similar to me when I married Richard's cousin Philip, confided an elegant woman in her 60s. My background wasn't suitable either. 30 years later, she still introduces me as Philip's hobby wife. Victoria and Marcus made special efforts to include Ethan in wedding traditions, inviting him to join the first dance and ensuring the photographer captured images of him with the bride and groom. When Victoria tossed her bouquet, she deliberately aimed it toward a group of young cousins rather than the single women, undermining another potential moment for social stratification. As the evening wound down, Richard observed these interactions from a distance, his expression suggesting internal conflict. He approached as we prepared to leave awkwardly, offering to walk us to the car. "Ethan's very articulate for his age," he commented as we crossed the parking lot. "Gets that from you, I suppose." "He's observant and honest," I replied, "qualities we should all aspire to." Richard nodded, hands shoved in his pockets. "I should visit more regularly, maybe weekend activities now that he's getting older." It wasn't quite an apology or acknowledgement of his failures, but it suggested some reflection had occurred. "He'd like that," I said simply. Consistency matters more than grand gestures. After settling a sleepy Ethan in the back seat, I started the drive home, emotions swirling too intensely for immediate processing. My son had defended me with more courage and eloquence than I had ever defended myself. The carefully constructed social hierarchy of the Henderson world had been momentarily toppled by a child's honest perspective. As Ethan's soft snores filled the car, I realized something fundamental had shifted tonight, not just in how others saw us, but in how I saw myself. The morning after Victoria's wedding, I woke to find Ethan already up, contentedly drawing at the kitchen table. "I'm making a picture of last night," he explained, pushing the paper toward me. "See, that's Aunt Victoria in her white dress, and that's you looking pretty in your red dress." His innocent perspective brought fresh tears to my eyes. While I had experienced the evening through a lens of social anxiety and vindication, he had simply enjoyed a special occasion with family. "Did you have fun?" I asked, pouring my much-needed coffee. "Mostly," he nodded. "Aunt Victoria was super nice, and Mr. Marcus knows a lot about baseball, but Grandma seemed mad all night." "Grown-ups have complicated feelings sometimes," I explained carefully. "I'm very proud of how you handled yourself." The phone rang mid-morning, displaying Victoria's number. I answered with trepidation, wondering if she was calling to express regret about the previous night's drama. "Alma, it's Victoria. I wanted to call before we leave for our honeymoon." She began, her voice warm. "First, Marcus and I absolutely love the memory book. It's thoughtful and personal, in a way none of our registry gifts could ever be. Ethan worked very hard on it." I acknowledged, relieved by her positive response. "Second," she continued, "I want to properly apologize for what happened. I had no idea Mother would do something so deliberately cruel. When Marcus told me about the seating card, I was mortified." "It wasn't your fault," I assured her. "Maybe not directly, but I've enabled Mother's behavior for years by staying silent. What Ethan did took incredible courage, and it made Marcus and me realize we don't want that kind of toxic dynamic in our marriage." We talked for nearly an hour, Victoria sharing her own struggles with Eleanor's controlling nature and admitting she'd often envied my escape from the family orbit, despite its financial challenges. "I'd like us to have a real relationship," she concluded. "Not the obligatory holiday appearance, but actual family connections. Would that be okay?" "I'd like that," I replied sincerely. Ethan would too. 3 days later, an elegant envelope arrived containing a handwritten note from Victoria, along with professional photographs from the wedding, including several beautiful shots of Ethan and me that I hadn't realized were taken. "These belong in your family album," Victoria wrote. "You both brought something genuine to our celebration that no amount of orchids or champagne could provide." More surprising was the email from Diane Levinson, the school board member I'd met at the reception. She requested a professional meeting to discuss a teaching opportunity in Northbrook District, known for its excellent schools and substantially better compensation than my current position. "Your innovative community literacy program is exactly the kind of initiative we're looking to expand," she wrote. "And your son's passionate advocacy suggests you're raising a remarkable young man, which speaks volumes about your values as an educator." Richard called the following weekend, asking to take Ethan for an actual father-son day rather than his usual brief visit. When he returned Ethan that evening, he lingered awkwardly at the door. "Could we talk sometime without Ethan present?" he asked, uncharacteristically hesitant. "There are some things I need to acknowledge." That conversation happened over lunch the following week at a neutral cafe midway between our homes. Richard arrived without pretense, dressed casually rather than in his usual business attire. "I've been a terrible father and an even worse ex-husband," he began bluntly. "Mother's influence is no excuse, but it's been substantial. Seeing Ethan stand up to her made me realize how rarely I've done the same. It's never too late to change patterns," I offered, surprised by his self-awareness. "I'd like to try," he said, "starting with proper financial support. My attorney will contact you about a revised agreement that actually reflects my income and Ethan's needs." He paused, stirring his coffee unnecessarily. "And I want you to know I've told Camille about my history of letting Mother dictate my relationships. She's suggested therapy might be helpful." "That sounds like good advice," I agreed, remembering how resistance to therapy had been one of our marriage's failure points. The revised support agreement arrived a week later, increasing the monthly amount to reflect Richard's actual substantial income. The accompanying letter also committed to college funds and other educational expenses, alleviating my greatest financial worry for Ethan's future. Eleanor's response to the wedding incident was predictable pointed silence. No calls, no messages, not even her usual criticisms delivered through Richard. This suited me perfectly. Years of therapy had helped me understand that some relationships cannot be healthy, regardless of effort, and boundaries were sometimes the only solution. After careful consideration, I accepted the Northbrook teaching position, allowing us to move to a better apartment in a neighborhood with excellent schools. The salary increase meant I no longer needed weekend work to make ends meet, giving Ethan and me precious time together for normal family activities. 6 months after Victoria's wedding, I encountered Eleanor unexpectedly at a grocery store. I had entered the upscale market only because they had a special sale on Ethan's favorite imported cheese, a rare treat I could now occasionally afford. Eleanor stood examining produce, her expression souring when she noticed me. "Alma," she acknowledged stiffly. "I understand you've taken a position in Northbrook." "Yes, I'm teaching 4th grade there now," I replied neutrally. "Well," she said after an uncomfortable pause, "I suppose educational advancement is commendable regardless of background." This backhanded compliment, once capable of ruining my day, now seemed almost laughable. "Ethan and I are doing very well, thank you for asking. He's excited about spending Thanksgiving with Victoria and Marcus." Eleanor's eyebrows rose at this information. Victoria had indeed invited us to their home for the holiday, specifically mentioning that her mother would be celebrating with Richard's father at their Florida residence. "How nice!" Eleanor managed, clearly surprised by this family realignment. "Well, I won't keep you." As she hurried away, I realized something profound. I no longer cared about her approval. The opinion that once dominated my self-worth now held no power over me. That Thanksgiving at Victoria and Marcus's home marked the beginning of new family traditions. Without Eleanor's presence, conversation flowed naturally. Richard attended with his now fiancée Camille, who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know Ethan. Victoria and Marcus treated me as a valued family member rather than an embarrassing connection. The most meaningful change, however, was in Ethan. Watching him navigate these new family dynamics with confidence and authenticity, I saw the fruit of our challenging journey. My son was growing into someone who recognized true worth beyond social status or financial means, who could speak truth to power when necessary, and who understood that character mattered more than credentials. As a teacher, I recognized this as the most important education I could have given him. Today marks 5 years since Victoria's wedding and Ethan's unexpected moment of advocacy. My 13-year-old son is now taller than me, excelling in both academics and baseball, with the same moral clarity that once led him to a wedding reception microphone. Our lives have transformed in ways I never imagined possible during those difficult early years of single parenthood. The teaching position at Northbrook became a launching pad for greater opportunities. After implementing a district-wide literacy program that significantly improved reading scores, I was promoted to curriculum coordinator and eventually to assistant principal. My salary now provides comfortable security, though we maintain the values formed during leaner times. Richard has evolved into a more consistent father, keeping weekly commitments with Ethan and actively participating in school events. His marriage to Camille brought unexpected benefits as she encourages healthier family dynamics and respects boundaries with Eleanor. Their daughter, now 3, adores her big brother, and Ethan takes his role as a mentor seriously. Victoria and Marcus have become true family, hosting regular dinners and including us in vacation plans. Last summer, they invited us to share their lake house for 2 weeks, creating memories of swimming, boating, and evening bonfires that Ethan still talks about. Victoria, now pregnant with twins, jokes that Ethan will be her childcare consultant, given his experience with young children through my classroom. Perhaps most significantly, Ethan's stand that night empowered me to maintain appropriate boundaries with Eleanor. While we interact at unavoidable family events, I no longer accept her criticism or allow her to undermine my confidence. She has adapted to this new reality with grudging acceptance, especially after Richard finally confronted her about her treatment of me over the years. The journey from that humiliating place card to my current life taught me lessons I now share with other single parents facing similar challenges. First, children observe everything. When I thought I was shielding Ethan from our struggles, he was absorbing valuable lessons about perseverance, dignity, and values. His defense of me at the wedding didn't come from nowhere. It grew from years watching me work multiple jobs without complaint, prioritize his needs above material comforts, and maintain integrity despite challenges. Second, true worth isn't determined by others' opinions. Eleanor's attempts to devalue me through the single Mother Waitress label only worked to the extent I accepted her measurement system. Once I fully embraced my own definition of success, external judgments lost their power. Third, authentic relationships thrive only with mutual respect. Victoria and Marcus demonstrated that family connections can be rebuilt on healthier foundations when both parties commit to genuine respect. Conversely, my relationship with Eleanor remains limited, precisely because that essential ingredient is missing. Fourth, allowing children to witness resilience is more valuable than protecting them from all difficulties. Ethan developed extraordinary empathy and moral courage, partly because he saw me navigate challenges with dignity rather than bitterness. Had I shielded him completely from our struggles, he might never have developed these qualities. Finally, standing in your truth, even through humiliation, eventually leads to freedom. That moment of public exposure at the wedding, painful as it was catalyzed, changes that ultimately liberated us from unhealthy patterns and relationships. Looking back, I marvel at how a cruel gesture, designed to diminish me, instead launched a cascade of positive transformations. My career flourished, Ethan developed remarkable character, and even Richard found courage to challenge dysfunctional family patterns. What Eleanor intended as humiliation became unintentional liberation. Most precious is the knowledge that Ethan carries these lessons forward. Last month, his middle school principal called to commend him for defending a new student being bullied for wearing second-hand clothes. Your son stood up and said that character matters more than labels, the principal reported. He's a natural leader. The 8-year-old who once climbed onto a platform, too tall for him to defend his mother, has grown into a teenager who instinctively defends others. No professional achievement or financial security could possibly make me prouder. In the end, Eleanor's single mother waitress label, intended as the ultimate dismissal, instead became the foundation of our greatest strengths. The journey taught us both that labels only have the power we give them, and that sometimes our greatest advocates come in the smallest packages. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone stood up for you unexpectedly? Or have you been the person who spoke truth in a difficult situation? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more authentic stories about finding strength in challenging circumstances. And if you know someone facing their own uphill battle as a single parent, share this video to remind them their worth isn't defined by anyone else's judgment. Thank you for listening. And remember, our children are always watching how we handle life's challenges, absorbing lessons that will shape who they become.